here we go.
Welcome to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast. This is Pat and Scott with our Week 15 start and sit competition episode, a little bit of both. Again, we've been going through this for 2 seasons now, where we try to do what some of the prognosticators do, but it's also a friendly competition between Pat and I, where we will choose who we think are the top 5 starts and sits based on quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver, and team defense, and then go back and forth with a point threshold. Pat's got this chart that looks like like Andy Reid's chart, kind of, that has all the breakdowns and where everybody was for that week. And there's colors. It's red, green, yellow. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's the holidays, folks. Again, we do appreciate you listening. So hopefully we can entertain you with our talk about Week 15 starts and sits. And again, we appreciate everybody out there that subscribes to the show. Again, you could give us a follow and a subscribe on Podbean, Apple Podcast, things like that just kind of help push us a little bit, drive the show. We are on YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a website, yes, folks, with a lot of links to it, www.the9routeffb.com. You can send us a little email with some questions, comments, concerns at the9routeffb@gmail.com. And Pat and I are at the 9route1 on Twitter, and I am independently at Scott from Delco, also on Twitter.
The chart that you're speaking of is, I feel like you need to be a quarterback to understand it. Honestly, it's pretty confusing. So definitely need to overhaul, like you said, some of the points concepts and overhaul the chart altogether. I don't think I need separate columns for the colors. I can just make them different colors. I don't really.
Whatever has me winning, that's all I care about.
I can't make that happen. That's something that I can only. What's the saying? You can only lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I'm trying here. You keep picking, Justin Jefferson as your sit. Like I mean, it's pretty easy to beat you. And even though he did have a bad game, it was still like 12 points.
He was a fade. I'm taking a hit for the team. He was a fade. Don't worry.
I get you. All right, so let's do our little review here from Week 14. We still have one pending because, again, we record on Mondays, and the Monday night game has not officially happened as of yet. So you are 3-5-1 heading into the Monday night game. I do not have any players left in the Monday night game, at least not for my start sits. I finished 6-4. Our head-to-head this week, I am up 5-4 with your one player pending. So you would need James Conner to score less than 11.8 fantasy points in order to knot this one up at 5-5 for the week. But as of right now, I am up 71-43. And again, if I can pull off another one, it'd be 72. If you get it, it'll be 71-65. So still a marginable lead here. You're going to have to string some good weeks together here to catch up.
See what I can do, buddy.
It's the playoffs, baby. It's the playoffs. You got to set your playoff start sit roster here.
I think I got it.
Well, we are going to find out.
So you get the right of first refusal, I guess, or how's this working?
Yeah, I mean, I am technically up as of right now. So you know what? I'm gonna let you go first this time. I'm feeling very generous in this holiday season.
Well, I appreciate that. You're looking out for me, and hey, I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
Start sits.
My quarterback start of the week is going to be none other than Andy Dalton. Yeah, relax. I know it's Andy Dalton. The New Orleans Saints at 4-9 don't seem like a playoff bound team. That being said, they're not going to look to tank either. They traded away their picks for next year. Their first rounder, actually, Philadelphia Eagles hold that pick, so they have nothing to play for to lose, and they're at 4-9, only 2 games out of their division lead again in the bum fight that is the NFC South with Carolina, with Atlanta, with Tampa Bay. Everybody's horrible. So again, all you got to do is just basically not suck as bad as everybody else, and you're going to make the playoffs. 2 weeks before the bye, Tampa Bay and San Francisco were two terrible matchups for any quarterback. Obviously, they got shut out against San Francisco, but behind that, though, Andy Dalton had some decent games. Not all of them, but he did have, he put up 28 points. He put up 33 points, 21 points. It had been on a level where maybe, just maybe, they were going to kind of poke through and get somewhere. So if anything, this team has to play for it is to say, hey, let's get into the playoffs. Let's see what we can do. You never know. That being said, Andy Dalton, to me, has the potential against the Atlanta Falcons, who are a very, very suspect team, to say the least. Again, you're looking at the Atlanta Falcons defense against Andy Dalton, division game. It's going to be a tough one, but I think he has one of his better games of the season coming off the bye and getting ready to maybe give those New Orleans Saints a playoff push. Andy Dalton, my quarterback, start of the week. Oh, and he'll help me big time in my league if, by the way, this just in. Yeah, I didn't have an angle. He in my 32-teamer, he is my quarterback of record. So if he kills it, that is really going to give me a help. So please.
You definitely shouldn't have made him your start then. You totally jinxed it. Way to go.
Got this.
Yeah, I made my start somebody that I hope has a terrible game. Just in case I am wrong, then I won't feel as bad about it. I am going to go with Dak Prescott this week versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Dak had as expected, a bad game against the Houston Texans. 2 of the 3 touchdowns that were scored by the Cowboys came on the ground. I think what wasn't expected was how close this game was, and that the Cowboys had to score a touchdown in the final minute just to pull out the win. The Cowboys almost looked past this game and ended up with a loss, but unluckily for us Eagles fans, they eked out a win over a now 1-11-1 team. Unfortunately for Jacksonville, games like this almost always mean terrible, terrible things for the next team on the slate. Whenever a team plays this bad, it just kind of wakes them up and makes them, sort of realize like, hey, we can't take these games for granted against these teams that we think we should beat. So I have a feeling that they're going to bring their A game on both sides of the ball this week, and Dak will atone for his lackluster Week 14 performance against a Jacksonville team that's the 3rd worst versus the quarterback position over the last 6 weeks, giving up over 22 fantasy points per game. With the Las Vegas implied points total of 21.5 for the Jags, the Cowboys might have to score some points and might have to do it in bunches. And this Jacksonville team has quietly been a top 12 team versus the running back position in fantasy over that same stretch. So this feels like a Dak, CeeDee Lamb kind of week to me. I think, the Cowboys are going to be pushing. Again, they got the Eagles in front of them, so constantly looking up at that one-loss team ahead of them and need to make sure that they keep winning in order to have a shot at some point down the stretch. So I think you can see a big game from both offenses in this one. And I think Dak has a pretty good week against a Jacksonville team that, likes to give it up to the quarterback. A couple other streamers for you this week. If Dak Prescott is not available or Dalton is not available to you, there's a couple other streamers that we like or that I like. I don't want to speak for Scott. Mike White versus the Lions. If he comes back and plays, I think he's in for a huge week against Detroit. Detroit scores a ton of points, but they also give up a ton of points. And the Jets have offensive weapons, so I think Mike White could have a big week. And Matt Ryan versus the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have been just completely terrible on defense. And I think that Matt Ryan could, again, have a game where he needs to keep up with the other team because Minnesota can score. So I think Mike White and Matt Ryan are both, if they're available for you in your league. Again, these are guys that we mentioned on our earlier episode this week with the with the playoff streaming options. Both of them have really good matchups in Week 15 if you can't grab Prescott or Dalton.
Moving on to the running back position. Kind of like J.K. Dobbins this week. Looked pretty impressive. Game was very physical. Both quarterbacks getting knocked out to the point where you had Anthony Brown, who promising, young player, but again, not worthy of a roster spot at quarterback. kind of forced the hand of the Baltimore Ravens offense. And again, we always talk about how run heavy those teams are, especially those two, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, but that division as a whole, Cincinnati being, the one outlier with the heavy wide receivers. But J.K. Dobbins, 15 carries, 120 yards and a touchdown, a 44-yard run. He averaged 8 a carry. Gus Edwards was right behind him, so it's not like it's his backfield by himself. A little bit of a hot hand, so to speak, but it was nice to see for a young player that was coming off a tough knee injury and has had stretches this year where it looked like he may be turning the corner and then regressing a little bit because of that. Maybe it was that Pittsburgh matchup that kind of had him going. He's got another matchup division-wise this week against the Cleveland Browns, who are one of the worst against the running back position. So I'm kind of leaning towards J.K. Dobbins having a pretty solid game. Maybe not quite what he had this past week, but enough to keep moving and maybe gets a little play out of the backfield as far as a pass catcher too. So J.K. Dobbins, I think he's got top 15, top 20 potential as a running back this week, and he's going to be in my starting lineup.
Yeah, he was surprising this past week, I will say. I didn't think he'd come back from injury and be that involved right away. My start of the week this week is going to be Isaiah Pacheco. I'm back to picking on the Texans. I went away from it for a week, and something just didn't feel right in my soul, so I had to go back and pick on the Texans again. But, I mean, if you saw the game against the Cowboys, the Texans showed why you start your running backs against them. Both Zeke and Pollard finished top 10 at the running back position in week 14. Again, still a game to be played, but they're both top 10 coming into the Monday night game. They've scored all 3 of Dallas's touchdowns in this game. Zeke had 1, the game winner, and Pollard had 2. The Texans are so bad against the run and subsequently so good against quarterbacks and wide receivers that I would almost advocate for sitting Mahomes this week if I hadn't already been burned by Mahomes, doubting him on the season, putting him as my QB8 in draft season. I don't think I can't question the great Patrick Mahomes again. But I do expect this game to be pretty much out of hand by halftime. And I can imagine that the Chiefs are going to be running the ball pretty much most of the second half. Andy Reid's still going to throw those plays in there. Mahomes still going to get his little passes, his dump offs, things like that. But I could actually see McKinnon having another good game, not as good as he had this week. But I could see both guys getting a ton of carries in a game where it could get out of hand really quickly. I know that Texans gave the old college try against the Cowboys last week, but and I say that because they're probably about as good as a college football team. But I think that with Isaiah Pacheco sort of being the grinded out, the between the tackles, the clockwork running back, as I like to call them, the guys that you give the ball to when you just want to run the clock out, I think you can absolutely fire him up against the Texans. I think there's going to be plenty of carries for him in this game.
All right. And moving on. Wide receiver start of the week is going to be Michael Pittman versus the Minnesota Vikings. Pat, I know you just touched on it. Minnesota's defense is horrendous, particularly against the wide receiver position. They've basically been bottom 3 all season. They just try to outscore you, and at times it has worked for them. Didn't work this past week. Jared Goff and those Detroit Lions really kind of took it to them. Pretty good. Jared Goff threw for 330 yards. DJ Chark, you had Amon-Ra St. Brown, both with 6 catches apiece. Josh Reynolds had 5 catches. We talked about Jamison Williams in our previous episode having his first NFL catch, a 41-yard touchdown reception. So being able to pass on this team is no problem whatsoever. And again, we talked about Matt Ryan being a positive streaming option. Again, they lead points, this Minnesota defense. So Michael Pittman, some people have been a little down on him, and there's been a lot of crazy things that have happened at the quarterback position. But for the season so far, he has 76 receptions for 755 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, maybe with more competitive, competent quarterback play, some consistency, whatever you want to call it. Those numbers could be a little better, as would the whole offense. Jeff Saturday seems to have, just kind of leveled off the ship a little bit for whatever was going on with Frank Reich there at the end. So I like Michael Pittman. I like him to ball out, honestly. I could see him definitely being a top 10 wide receiver this week against those Minnesota Vikings. But at the rate they're going, Pat, I think you and I could be top 25.
Well, it's funny that you say you and I, because my start of the week is actually Paris Campbell in this same game.
There it is.
I mean, I was looking at the numbers and I'm like, how do you not pick someone from Indianapolis in this game. Like the Vikings have been so bad over the last 6 weeks. The Vikings are giving up. Are you ready for this?
Ready.
50 PPR points per game to the wide receiver position. That is ridiculous.
Because they don't care. Because you look at, I mean, really, again, you look at that, like the box score of that game. It's like, yeah, Kirk Cousins, 31 of 41, 425, 2 touchdowns, had a great game. Justin Jefferson, 11 for 223. And you still lost by 11.
Yeah.
Like, because, you can't stop them. And you get all the way down the field, and that's great. But, Christ, you can't do nothing. And, oh, God. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Listen. For all the same reasons is why I'm starting Paris Campbell. Basically, everything that you just spelled out for Pittman. Campbell he's the number 2 on this team, obviously behind Pittman, but he's not that far behind. As Matt Ryan, when he came back in week 10 to be the starter again, Campbell is right behind Michael Pittman with 23 targets, 18 receptions, and 1 touchdown in the past 4 weeks. He's a major part of this offense now. I really thought it was going to be Alec Pierce, who did have a pretty good showing in week 13, the last time they played. But Campbell's the number 2. He's finally living up to some of the hype that has been kind of swirling around him over the past couple of years, where he just couldn't get anything done. But I think Matt Ryan is maybe not the best quarterback in the league, but he's a guy. You give him some wide receivers who are, serviceable, and he can deliver. He can deliver some passes to him, and I think Campbell and Pittman are both great plays this week in a game where this has one of the highest over-unders on the week. So there's definitely going to be points scored in this one, and I want as many parts of both of these. I think you could start Adam Thielen in this one as well, because I don't think the Colts are great, against the pass either. So definitely going to be one of those high-scoring games where I'm going to want a lot of pieces. So we'll just see which one of our pieces scores more points in this week's starts it.
Yeah. We may end up having a push there.
It'll be all tight ends. It'll be, your boy Jelani Woods and Mo Alley-Cox.
Yeah. Speaking of tight ends, why not? Okay. I will do, how about Greg Dulcich for the win? Denver Broncos, their offense has been pretty subpar this season. And again, there's still a quarterback issue with Russell Wilson and concussion protocol that you have to monitor. Brett Rippon could be the guy this week, but I don't care. The Arizona Cardinals defense against the tight end, that's a cheat code. They're the worst by far in the league. Giving up almost about 20 points a game to the position. They've given up almost 1,000 yards already, 86 receptions on 104 targets, 9 touchdowns. Like, they just can't cover this position. And this is a great young tight end that I've been banging the drum for a while. He's had a couple ups and downs. He had an okay game. It could have been a lot better. He was targeted 8 times, only came down with 3 balls. But at the end of the day, when you look at that roster, he's only played in 7 games, but he's 3rd on the team in targets, behind obviously Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton. And if Sutton's out, banged up, and you're looking for people to throw to, it sounds like this is a guy. He only has 1 touchdown. So again, he's getting all of his points this season in the true concept of PPR. That is, what you want out of the position. You don't want him to be too touchdown dependent, because again, that can really make or break you. I mean, it can help win, but it's somebody maybe sustained that you're really kind of looking to, have in your roster as a whole. So I like Greg Dulcich this week to smoke the Arizona Cardinals, get me some points, and be honestly probably a top 5 player at that position for the week, Pat.
Yeah, Dulcich is one of those guys who isn't touchdown dependent, which is good because it gives you a baseline of points even when he doesn't score, which he hasn't done a lot this year because the Denver offense hasn't scored a lot. But yeah, I actually he's one of the guys that I had as the streaming options at the tight end position as well. So I do like that call. I am going to go with David Njoku this week versus Baltimore. I almost went with Gerald Everett again versus the Tennessee Titans because the Titans are a good matchup, which means because I didn't pick him, he'll probably absolutely go nuts this week. So you're welcome for that. Start Gerald Everett. But I wanted to highlight David Njoku here. The Ravens have been a lot better on defense over the last 6 weeks than they were earlier in the season. But the one place that They still give up some points as the tight end position. But this pick is less about the Ravens and more about the Cleveland Browns. Since Deshaun Watson has been back from his suspension and starting for Cleveland, the Browns have been understandably throwing the ball more than they did with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. It hasn't necessarily led to more wins. I think they're 1-1 in his 2 starts, but it shows that they're trying to become a more balanced offense. They were really run heavy in the beginning of the season, and things have started to turn to a little bit more balance now. Watson is still getting back to, it's the first time he's been on the field in over 700 days last week, for his first start. So he's going to get better as a passer as the season goes on. It's like anything else that you do in life. You can do it for a really long time. Like I went out and shot hoops with my son the other day, and I was like missing the rim and stuff. And then you kind of get back into it and you start to get the feel for it again. And then all of a sudden, like, he doesn't want to play with me anymore because I don't miss. So that, Watson will eventually get back to the point where he doesn't miss. It's just a matter of, letting him get there. And I think that one of the ways that he gets there is by taking these short, high percentage passes, to Njoku, who's already been targeting a ton since he's been back. And Njoku's athleticism is off the charts. I mean, he's one of those guys who, as we saw in a game last year, I believe it was, he took like a slant route, like 60 some yards to the house, which you do not see at the tight end position, because generally cornerbacks and safeties can run you down when, you're a tight end and you've got 60 yards to go. But Njoku has the athletic ability of a wide receiver. And I think that makes him a great target for Watson. And Watson's already shown that he likes to throw to Njoku, and he does well when he throws to him. He's got the highest completion percentage to Njoku than he does than any other player on the team. So definitely think he's a good start this week, even though it's going to be a tough matchup. I think Njoku gets a touchdown in this one, and I think that he has a good game. A couple of other guys, like I mentioned, Gerald Everett this week versus tight end has a good matchup, versus Tennessee has a good matchup. Your guy, Greg Dulcich, and also Tyler Conklin, who we mentioned in our playoff streamers, has a really good matchup versus the Detroit Lions this week. So again, if Njoku or Dulcich is not available, you can go with Everett or Conklin this week as well at the tight end position.
And rounding out our starts of the week, I'm going to give you my defense. And I kind of going with my gut a little bit here, but I like the New England Patriots against the Las Vegas Raiders. Got a lot of stuff in the background there. It's Bill Belichick against Josh McDaniel, which is a huge thing for me. The master versus the student kind of thing, which I always kind of like that play. Where who's going to know what the other guy's doing. Plus, the Raiders just kind of crashed and burned there on Thursday Night Football, where they had a win and they just found a way to give it back to the Rams and a quarterback who will not be named. But, at the end of the day, I feel like, the Raiders just can't get out of their own way and are probably going to maybe regress a little bit more throughout the season under first-year coach Josh McDaniel. Not first year as a whole, but with that team. You look at the New England Patriots, and we're actually recording on Monday night, so they haven't played the Cardinals yet. So with a game in hand behind, I guess, so to speak, they're second in the league in total yards allowed. So, I mean, it's still a Bill Belichick defense, and seeing him just want to punch that team in the mouth. He knows his quarterbacks. He'll find ways to take stuff away from Derek Carr. They're stingy against the run, so Josh Jacobs shouldn't blow the doors off him like he's done to other teams in recent weeks. I do like the New England Patriots to put up some points, possibly double digits, but definitely be that respectable 7 or 8, getting a turnover or two from the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders, man, that Thursday night game was – I'm talking of basketball. I used to play for a coach, one of my favorite coaches of all time, but he used to have this saying, and it's a common saying, but the first time I ever heard it, I was probably 16, and it was, don't play to not lose, play to win. And watching that Raiders-Rams game, it just seemed like the Raiders were playing to not lose. Like they just wanted to keep running the ball and trying to wind the clock, even though I mean, they had a 14-point lead, but there was a lot of plays in that game that just I'm scratching my head. Like, why would you do that? Like, I don't understand. Are you trying to like give them an opportunity to win this game? Like, it just, I don't know, man. Especially with the defense that the Raiders had, I wouldn't. No lead is safe. So I don't know. It was bothering me, but yeah, the Raiders are definitely on the downhill for the rest of the season, I believe. My start this week is only because I got into the show doc before you did. It's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs again. I went with the Chiefs last week. This week they get the Houston Texans. We talked about them in our playoff streamers episode earlier in the week. They are, again, I'll reiterate what I said in case you didn't hear the last one, but they're one of those teams that they put points on the board against you, and then they force you to throw the ball. And if you don't like throwing the ball, which the Houston Texans would prefer to not do, too bad, because in order to keep the game anywhere semblance of a close game, you have to throw. And then that's where they get their points. They get their sacks, their forced fumbles, their interceptions, all those things. They scored a defensive touchdown against the Broncos this past week. So don't look too much into the Houston Texans being like, well, they put 23 up against the Cowboys. Yeah, but let's be honest, the Cowboys were probably looking past that game, and that's kind of why that game got out of hand the way that it did. I just think that Chiefs are not great as far as not giving up points, but they are third in the league with 42 sacks, and they forced 14 turnovers, and they've had 2 defensive touchdowns so far this season. So definitely a game where things could get out of hand, and the Houston Texans could be throwing the ball a lot more than they want to, giving a lot of opportunity to the Chiefs. And that's why I would absolutely 100% start them this week versus the Houston Texans. A couple other defenses you can look at as well if the Chiefs are not available, which they may not be, or if the Patriots are not available, which they probably are not because they're a good defense. Baltimore versus Cleveland. I think Baltimore's defense has been marketably better the last few weeks. Arizona versus Denver, and that's basically just because you can start anybody versus Denver, especially if Russell Wilson is out. Green Bay gets the Rams this week. The Rams are the second best matchup for fantasy defenses. And then I think you could start either Pittsburgh or Carolina in that game. I feel like that's going to be a low-scoring game. Sam Darnold and potentially Mitch Trubisky at quarterback could be potentially a lot of turnovers and potentially lead to one or both of those teams scoring defensive touchdowns. So those are the opportunities you want to look for when you're looking for a defense to start. And so I like those teams, especially this week in Week 15.
Duly noted, Pat. Yep. Folks, again, we give you our starts and sits, and obviously it's our main picks, but there's always a couple guys we're on the fence flipping a coin just to say who we feel would be a better option. But again, we'll try to give you some of the other concepts out there. But, when it comes to our standings, we have to pick one guy or gal. Well, not gal, just guys.
Or a whole team.
Yeah, or a whole team defense, yes. Speaking of picking gals, I'm going to go with my sit of the week. Yeah, come on, it's coming. Player I'm not really too high on is one Kyler Murray. And going up against that Denver Broncos defense, as bad as the offense has been, their defense has been pretty good all season long. I don't know if it's just because they're pissed because of the quarterback play and the offense being as bad as they are. They do give up some yards, and again, they can be breached on the ground a little bit more. But when it comes to passing yards and things of that nature, they're holding quarterbacks back. They're really one of the best overall, pretty much a top 5 defense against that position. You're going to have Kyler Murray on a shorter week as he has to play on Monday Night Football. And again, coming after a tough game against the New England Patriots to turn around and then have to go back against that defense as well. I just don't see it being in the cards, pardon that pun, for Kyler Murray. And again, I think it's another tough matchup, another tough defense. And he is somebody that you probably could find a better option for. A top 15 quarterback, maybe with a little leg work there, but another week to stick with Call of Duty there, buddy. Sorry.
I am going to sit this week Deshaun Watson versus the Baltimore Ravens. Just talked a little bit about their defense being a good start. I know it seems a little counterintuitive to say start Njoku, but then also to sit Watson. But it's as simple as this. It doesn't take much to be a good start at the tight end position. but to be a good quarterback, you really have to score some points. And so I think Watson will have an okay day, but not enough to consider him starting quarterback caliber this week, especially since there's nobody on a bye anymore. You don't have to, you're not missing 6 quarterbacks like you were last week. And with Baltimore's defense playing a lot better as of late, this lines up to be another one of those AFC North battles that we love to watch, but we hate for fantasy purposes. The game itself only has a 37.5 over under. And as of today, I don't see it going up at all from there with Tyler Huntley being questionable to play. This could be another one of those, sub 30 point NFC, AFC North games that just disappoints for fantasy owners. So definitely sit Deshaun Watson this week. I do think he's got some favorable matchups coming up, but I think if you can get through your first week of your playoffs without him, then I think you've got better days ahead. But this is one where I would not want to play him if I had another option.
All right. Going to put my neck out there again. Pick a guy and everybody, what are you talking about? He's best. He's awesome. Running back position this week, I feel like it's going to be a strong fade, and some of this is health-wise too. I'm not digging Saquon Barkley this week. I know you're not going to bench him. He's going to be your flex, maybe your RB2. And again, I just feel like he's not going to do what he did recently against Washington. He was limited this week. He was injured. We talked about that. He had a pretty good game just the other week when they had their beautiful tie, put up close to 20 points. But there was an issue throughout this week where there was a neck injury. His status was questionable, up in the air, even up to game day when he finally said, yeah, he'd play. 9 carries for 28 yards. He had 2 receptions for 20 yards. And obviously the Eagles dominated that game from start to finish. Washington's defense isn't quite where the Eagles defense is. No, sir. But the way I kind of see it is that it's going to be one of those games where, this is a playoff matchup in a sense, because both teams currently are in the entire NFC East right now is qualified for the playoffs if it ended today. These two just played to a tie, so one of them is going to probably look to gain an advantage over the other as a head-to-head tiebreaker. But I don't see Saquon Barkley having a tremendous game. Again, I could see him being held by a defense that has been pretty good, especially recently against the running back position. And again, I just kind of see that happening where it's just not going to work out for our friend Saquon in New York.
I actually traded Saquon in one of my leagues. I was out of it anyway, but did not love his playoff schedule. So definitely understand where you're coming from with that one. I am going to sit Jamal Williams this week versus the New York Jets. Let me just say this first and foremost. I love Jamal Williams. I think he's hilarious. He's obviously one of those guys that everybody in the locker room gets along with. They love him. He's a great guy. I have him on a few of my rosters, and he's carried me through some, to some wins earlier in the season. So I'm not saying anything bad about Jamal Williams. Love the guy. And he actually leads the league in multi-touchdown games this season. He's got 5 games where he scored at least 2 touchdowns, which is absolutely crazy because they've only played, 13 games. So to have 2 or more touchdowns, he had 3 in one of them. He leads the league in touchdowns on the ground. Unfortunately, the last 3 weeks has been pretty rough. He scored under 11 PPR points in each game. And the funny part is, in 2 of those 3 games, he scored a touchdown. He just doesn't get enough work in the passing game to be relied upon if he doesn't score a touchdown. And now with DeAndre Swift back and looking like he's 100% again, he's even losing out on some of the goal line carries to Swift. And that used to be all him. And so if I can't trust him in the red zone, and I can't trust him to get targets because he averages less than 1 target per game, then I can't continue to start him on the hopes that he's going to score multiple touchdowns. It's just too unlikely that keeps happening, especially against a Jets defense that's been top 10 versus the running back in the last 6 weeks. And they're giving up under 20 PPR points per game to the position as a whole. And now you have to factor in, let's just assume they give up 25 to the Lions. How many is Swift going to have and how many is Williams going to have? You know what I mean? It's just Swift is the RB1. Williams is more of the, when they need a tough yard, when they need a goal line carry, but you can't bank on that kind of stuff. So I am going to sit, and I'm actually taking this advice myself. I am actually sitting Jamal Williams in one of my playoff rosters this week. So I suggest you do the same.
Yeah, that's one thing, folks. We give the advice, and then it's even tough for us sometimes to turn around and do that. Go, I don't know. But
Yeah.
that does help us make those decisions. Terry McLaurin, again, you're probably not going to sit him. I get it, unless you have some depth at wide receiver, and you're saying, dude, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, he just had a monster game before the bye week against the same New York team. I just think that this one is going to be a little bit of a different matchup. I can't imagine that somebody who was able to exploit 8 of 12 for 105 and a touchdown is going to be given free reign all over the field. I think that's going to be somebody that they try to really shadow cover, however you want to look at it, really just kind of hold them back. The Giants have been a pretty good defense this season against the pass, against the wide receiving position. And that was one of those games where, again, he kind of just did it all. Giants have been fading a little bit down the stretch, but again, both teams just played to a 20-20 tie just 2 weeks ago. Washington coming off a bye week. And I can't see that the Giants would let somebody, again, like that exploit it. I think it might be a bigger day for your Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, type of thing. Not saying he's not going to come into play, but I think he's going to get a quick turnaround like he's had throughout the season. I mean, he had 26.5 points in that Giants game in our league of record. And before that, he put up 2 weeks in a row of under 10 points with 9.6 and 9.3. Before that, he had 22, then 10, then 18, then 8, then 12. So there's been more consistency at the quarterback position. But again, if Taylor Heineke gets beat up a little bit by the Giants team that is coming off a big loss and they're looking to take it to a team and it's a division game, Terry McLaurin, I'm sorry, buddy, but I don't see it happening for you again this week.
I am going to sit DJ Moore this week versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's funny, Pittsburgh was one of the teams that you were looking to start your quarterbacks and wide receivers against earlier in the season. From weeks 4 to week 8, the Steelers were dead last in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position and second to last versus the quarterback position. But since TJ Watt came back in week 10, the Steelers have completely turned things around defensively. Since week 10, they're the third best team versus both the quarterback and the wide receiver positions in fantasy football and have given up 20 actual points in a game just one time in those 4 weeks. It was 37 to Cincinnati in week 11, but every other game has been under 20 points by the Steelers defense. So if you're looking at the season-long stats, and you're going to see, especially a lot of the apps that, Sleeper, NFL.com, or ESPN, you're going to see a little green number next to the Pittsburgh Steelers saying, yay, it's start me against this bad defense. Don't listen to that. That is a cumulative total over the season. That does not count for TJ Watt effect. I don't know how the guy's not the MVP. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the Steelers defense with him and without him, it's almost like they're a completely different team. They are so much better than the season stats suggest right now. And I expect this to be a pretty low-scoring game. Like I said, a lot of turnovers with these quarterbacks. I don't see a lot of points being put on the board. And I want no part of really anybody in this game, honestly. I would try to avoid all pieces if I possibly could. But I definitely don't want a part of DJ Moore. Talking about how Terry McLaurin is hit or miss. DJ Moore, I've affectionately named him DJ Moore or less because he either has like 30 points or 3. Like there's almost like it seems like there's no in between with DJ Moore. He either absolutely blows up or completely I think last week he had 0.9 fantasy points. I don't even know how that's possible in PPR, but he had less than 1 point. And like the week before that, he had like 28 or something. Like I don't want to deal with that in my playoffs. I'd rather take a guy that scores 14 or 15 consistently than take a shot with DJ Moore, especially against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense that's been a lot tougher as of late.
True. Yeah. The wonders will never cease. Staying with that game, I'm going to go with my tight end sit of the week. And just saying, again, we don't know yet what's going to happen with Kenny Pickett. Obviously was in concussion protocol after yesterday. And that meant Mitchell Trubisky was back at quarterback. Pat Freiermuth at tight end. I kind of feel like this is a tougher matchup against the Carolina Panthers. He had a decent game yesterday. It wasn't horrible, but again, the game wasn't anything crazy. Did have a touchdown catch. Like I understand he's one of the better young up and coming tight ends in the league and, has been playing pretty well recently, but I do think that this matchup does scream, hey, a little bit of a letdown, especially if you're going to have Mitchell Trubisky as your quarterback. Now, again, I know he was out there on the field and he had a 12.5-point game just about in our league of record. But I think this game's going to be a little tougher for him. I don't see him maybe quite doing what he did this past week, last 2 weeks. Again, he's been good, but this is going to be one of those games where the ups and downs kind of leans towards the down. Carolina Panthers, not that they're playing for anything, but again, pride is one thing, and being just statistically one of the better teams against the position is something you want to lean on. So I am going to find a better option than Pat Freiermuth this week in Week 15 against the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, man. But I will say this. I just heard this yesterday. I didn't know this on my own. But the Carolina Panthers are playing for something. They actually control their own destiny. If they win out, no matter what happens with any other games, they win the division.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
Because they play the Bucks again. So they would obviously have to beat them to win out, and that would then give them the division, which is absolutely nuts that we're at this point where Carolina can still not just make the playoffs, but actually win the division is absolutely absurd. But that
could you imagine them playing San Francisco too?
In the first round
and upset them? Oh God, yeah, that'd be some stuff there, man.
Yeah. So my sit this week, I'm going to go with two players because not quite sure which one is playing. It is. Yeah, but I don't like either of them. Darren Waller and Foster Moreau. Waller seems like he could potentially be back this week. He is slated to practice this week. We don't know, how far that's going to get. He hasn't actually played a game since week 5. But either way, this is one of those don't look at the season-long stats for New England. New England has been very good versus the tight end in the last 5 weeks. They rank 3rd against opposing tight ends, giving up just 6.8 PPR points per game during that span. And Foster Moreau didn't score a single point this past week. Darren Waller's coming back off of injury. You said that you wanted to start the Patriots defense, which I definitely don't blame you for that. I'm with you, man. I just don't want, other than Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs, just because they have been absolute stalwarts for your fantasy team, I really don't want to start anybody else from the Raiders. Don't want to start their defense. Don't want to start any tight ends or quarter. I definitely don't want to start Derek Carr. It's just not, they're not in a good place right now. And I don't want any part of it if I can avoid it.
All right. I believe you. And finally, my defensive sit of the week. And it brings me great pride to say this. I will not want any parts of the Dallas Cowboys defense this week. Yeah, they've been, their stats are there. And again, there's that insane game that they just had against the Indianapolis Colts, where it was fourth quarter turnover laden, everything else under the sun. They had a little bit of trouble this past week against the Houston Texans. You're going up against the Jaguars team this week, who really don't hold back on offense. They tend to be one of the tougher teams for defenses because they just find different ways to score, get points. They don't turn the ball over a ton through the season. Trevor Lawrence has come around and has really started to blossom as a quarterback. 20 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. That's pretty solid, when it comes down to it for a team like Jacksonville. So I feel like this is one of those games where we got a little skin in it. Ex-Eagles Super Bowl champion coach Doug Peterson running that team. Jacksonville smells a little blood in the water too. The Tennessee Titans are only 2 games up on them, with not a lot left to play. So Jacksonville, they could sneak into the playoffs unbeknownst to everybody in the league and then suddenly make a little noise for a team that's kind of reborn with a new coaching staff and a great young squad. And again, I just feel like that Cowboys team, they know they're in the playoffs, this, that, and the third. Or hearing ESPN tell them they're the best team in the history of the universe and, just lock it in right now. But I just feel like that overall that they're going to, they're looking ahead right now. They're looking ahead to that Eagles matchup in a couple weeks. That's really going to be for the division. They won all that. And I think that they're going to be a little scared. And I definitely think that Jacksonville is going to light them up a little bit this week. I would not be surprised if the Jaguars upset the Cowboys. I'll put it that way.
Is that a wishful thinking, or you putting your money where your mouth is on that one?
I mean, I not that I have money to put anywhere. But I mean, again, I know they're on the road, but right now I think they're only like a 4.5 point
Mhm.
favorite so far. That to me kind of says that maybe they're thinking, Dallas doesn't do anything too bad if they lose the game. I mean, for the sake of the finishing out of the season and stuff, they're probably going to be right there they're not going to get a bye, so they're going to have a home field. Maybe Minnesota like pips them for the 2-3. To lose this game non-conference won't kill you. You know what I mean? And that's the other thing I think where they kind of get it, just like get that loss out of the way. It's like, well, I still think that's kind of stupid. But overall, I think that, I do feel like Jacksonville has a chance to kind of upset these guys. And again, because they're playing for something and not, they play the Cowboys, then they have the Jets, the Texans, and they finish their season against the Titans. That could be for the division.
Yeah, I think for the Cowboys, they're either going to be first or fifth in the NFC. I mean, that's really either they get some help and beat the Eagles, and the Eagles lose another game, and the Cowboys could eventually win the division, which is a long shot at this point, but that's possible. Or they're going to be the best wild card team, best record of the wild card teams. I don't really think there's an in between for them at this point, unless things really go south quickly, which I wouldn't mind, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, and don't forget, Jacksonville has the best tight end in football in Evan Ingram.
Yeah, if you go off of last week only, I think you're
Exactly.
absolutely right. All right, my sit this week is going to be the Tampa Bay Bucks versus the Cincinnati Bengals. When the Bucks won the Super Bowl 2 years ago, they did it not only on the back of Tom Brady, but more so on the back of a stellar defense. And that defense no longer exists in Tampa Bay. They're still fairly tough against the run, but with all the injuries to their defensive backfield, the Bucks have struggled against good passing teams. Now they get Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are fourth in total passing yards, fifth in completion, sixth in yards per attempt, and second in passing touchdowns. Not a good matchup for the Bucks, who are under 500, but still in first place and fighting to win that NFC South division and make the playoffs. But if they want to get back to 500 this week with a win against the Bengals, they're going to have to do it on the offensive side of the ball, because I feel like the Bengals are going to score, and I think the Bucks are going to have to offensively keep up with them or get absolutely trucked in this game.
Yeah, I think you're right, Bill. I think you're right. Well, that's it for starts and sits this week. I'm hoping to gain some ground on you, Pat. We'll see what happens. I know we still have one in play for tonight that may have a small effect of just a push, but I'll take any momentum I can moving forward in these final weeks of the NFL and fantasy football season. Folks, again, we do love everybody out there. We appreciate you for listening. And as you listen, please try to hit that subscribe and follow button on everything out there: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Podbean. You can take a look at our website. We have plenty of links to everything there. It's www.the9routeffb.com. You can shoot us an email if you're interested in finding out more about us or the show or our process, or give you some insider info that we have that maybe we didn't make available now through the weekend. You can email us, the9routeffb@gmail.com. We are at the 9route1 on Twitter. If you want to hit us up real quick, I am at Scott from Delco. Again, please feel free to reach out, contact us. And again, we love trying to get everybody that info to get you to that fantasy football playoff and that championship. And again, I think we can do it here. Again, we appreciate everybody for listening.
Yeah, like Scott said, we record on Mondays here. So when new information comes out, we don't really have another chance to put that information out. I know that the podcasts don't get released right away, and you won't hear this one until probably Friday morning. But information is obviously coming out all the time. Injuries, people added to the injury report late. So yeah, definitely check us out on social media. We do post a lot of that stuff. If you have any questions about anything, players or news that you may have heard, we follow that stuff very, very closely. And, this is like Scott said before, this is a hobby for us, but we do take it very seriously. We want to make sure that if we're putting information out there, to the listeners, that we're giving you the best information that we have when we have it. So following us on social media, emailing the show, we'll definitely get back to you with answers to any of your questions. Before we go, we want to thank Mickey's Port of Call Pub for partnering with the show. If you're looking for a great place to watch the NFL on Sunday, Mickey's is it. They have great food, drink specials, and all the football you can handle. Mickey's Pub, located at 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton, New Jersey, where friends and family meet. And we're starting to get into the holiday season now. I know that I actually just told my wife earlier today that next weekend there's football on Saturday and Sunday. And she was kind of like, are you kidding me? And I said, look on the bright side, bring all the Christmas presents in that you bought, put them on the floor, and I will mindlessly wrap them while I'm watching football all weekend. And she was like, oh, really? Okay. So,
help me help you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. It's got, it's give and take, man. If you want a good relationship, you have to, there's got to be some compromise made. So she knows I'm not going to miss football. And I know that she's going to make me end up wrapping those presents at some point anyway. So let's just get it all knocked out now.
Get her done. Hey, good, man. Smart. I will be working. So you enjoyed wrapping those presents, buddy.
All right, man. You got anything else before we head out? This Monday Night Football game is going to kick off here soon. I want to try to catch some of it at least.
Yeah. No. Again, appreciate everybody for listening. Week 15 sits in the books. It's getting down to the end times now for us, folks. Again, we appreciate everybody out there for listening. For Pat, I am Scott. We'll see you next week for Week 16. Peace.